So, welcome everybody to this wonderful episode we have planned for you today. Today is a foursome. Yes, that sounds really exciting, doesn't it? We have two guests with us, but the wonderful thing is the guests don't know each other. But you, our listeners, you might recognize the guests. We have Maria, who is with us, and we have Dave, who's with us as well. And they have been guests before, but today they're coming in on a slightly different capacity, but they don't know each other. So this is going to be a fun episode, is doing it at foursome where two of the guests don't know each other. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring a perspective of what it's like to run a business as a parent. And we thought, right, who do we know and what guests have we had who are parents? And we got these two wonderful guests. So first of all, and I'm going to go the old-fashioned way as ladies first, because why not? It's my podcast, my party, and I get to choose. How's that? So first of all, let me introduce you to Maria. And I'm going to get Maria to introduce herself to you, because she can tell you a little bit about who she is, what she does, and let us know a little bit about your family situation, amount of kids, husband, yes, no, and just a little bit on that. And then we'll go to our second guest. So welcome, Maria. It's fantastic to have you back on our podcast in a slightly different capacity. So because before we talked about extroversion. So welcome.
Thank you. It is good to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So yes, my name is Maria Newman, and with my business hat on, I help my clients to regain their confidence, reconnect with who they are, and silence their inner critics so that they can navigate life with certainty in this uncertain world. And it's those individuals who basically are going through a life event and they're entering a new chapter. I obviously am not my business. I am an individual. I'm also a mum. I have two very challenging yet beautiful children. I have a daughter who's 11 and I have a son who's 8, and they themselves are going through very different changes, not just because one's a girl, one's a boy, because of where they are in school. And I'm married, I live in Bristol, and in my spare time, when I have time to myself, I like to run. I love to cook, I love food, and I'm also a black belt in kickboxing martial arts.
So first of all, avoid Maria down a dark alley because she'll beat you up. But thank you for that. And I don't blame you with the running, because it might be the only one place that you can just be yourself, just on your own, without the kids, without the business, without the husband. So thank you for that. Welcome, Dave James, to the show. Welcome back. It's great to have you back. And it is so nice to have you in a different capacity, because you were talking about building a business. You were talking also about podiatry and how that has, what you learned from that and the experiences that you've had. And I think since we last spoke, you've added stand-up comedian to what it is that you're doing. So it's always nice when you get people coming on, you learn a bit more about them. But share with us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your situation, the family dynamics, or how it works for you, and then we can start to grill you, wonderful guests.
Grilling sounds like fun. I'm going to start. I'll start with the kids so that when they do watch this in the future, they can believe that I do actually love them. So I am a dad. I'm separated now. I've been separated 3 years. I have 3 children: a 19-year-old girl, a 16-year-old boy who's just doing GCSEs, and a 13-year-old boy who's starting his GCSEs. So a little bit different in terms of ages to Maria, having been through those stages as well. So I remember that. And I've been separated 3 years. My kids live mostly with my ex. That's the bigger house. They seem to have gravitated there. My youngest, for a couple of years, would spend school hours about 3 nights a week with me, which was really good fun. And I have to say, I miss that. Where he's living now is closer to his big school, And he's like, Dad, I don't want to walk 15 minutes to school. I'd rather walk 3. So, which is fair. He's a 13-year-old. He's 14 actually in a couple of weeks. He can make his own decision. So that's my personal side. I live in Birmingham. I love Bristol, by the way. It's where my dad came from. I absolutely adore Bristol. But I'm in Birmingham. Yeah, big up the Bristol. And I'm in Birmingham, which is another city beginning with a B. So everyone for the B cities. I now coach people around, I suppose there's elements of business and marketing coaching, there's elements of life coaching, but also a lot of speaker coaching. So the tagline, which Maria did so beautifully, is I help business owners to speak with authenticity and confidence, because everything I do comes back to authenticity and confidence. I speak a lot myself. It's one of my hats as a professional speaker. So I speak a lot on mental health and marketing, and also work with the Professional Speaking Association. And yes, there's the stand-up comedy bit on the side. And I have been paid for stand-up comedy. I got paid £5 once, so it's not a lie. And I love comedy. And for me, it's about bringing all those 3 things together to see how they work. And that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And comedy is a great way to build confidence, to break the ice, there's nothing better than humor, and comedy and stand-up comedy is a way to connect people through humor.
Glue is also quite a good way to connect people as well, I find. So
especially super glue.
Yeah, but it's unfortunately people don't like that.
No, because then they can't necessarily just go and leave when they want to. So it could be a bit sticky. So what I'd like to know, and feel free, whoever gets in there first to answer this question, is what experiences or what have you realized is being a self-employed or working from home and having to bring up your kids or work around essentially your kids' routines. So whether they are, so you get the school hours, but there's still things that you need to do. And what has it been like as a business owner to have the kids, to just experience that?
I'm going to get there first then. So when I first started my business, I was going from being in the corporate world to starting my business. So to start with, I already had those habits of, it's more or less a 9-to-5 job. Obviously, school hours aren't 9 to 5. So we got ourselves, and I say we because obviously it's a decision between me and my husband. We got ourselves into a situation where we were putting the children into breakfast club and after school club so that we could maintain a more traditional working hour. And then obviously when I started my business, that just carried on. And I started my business a year or so before lockdown. And it was actually lockdown that acted as the shake-up to say, is this really how you want life to be? Is this really the routine that you want for you and your family? And I only say that obviously having gone through it and reflected on it and subsequently made different decisions, because like with most things in life, being a parent, you don't automatically know what you should and shouldn't do for your family. It's an organic thing. It evolves as you, through trial and error, you realize what works and what doesn't work. So I'm actually going to say thank you, lockdown, because as a result of lockdown, I reduced my hours. I've decided to only work term times. My children don't go to breakfast club and after school club or holiday club. And between my husband and myself now, we manage it so that I can still work on the business and I have the freedom to work on the business. And he can still, as an employed individual, do his hours. And I know that sounds really idyllic, and it is a nice situation to be in now. But we've gone on a journey. I hate that word, journey. It's overused. It is the truth. We've got to where we are because we have made mistakes and gone, I don't like that, and I don't want it to be like that. And our children have also thrown tantrums, and we've gone, right, okay, do we want to change? And if we do want to change, what does it now look like? So yes, that's how we've managed it.
So it's finding what works for you. It's finding that balance. It's finding that routine. And like you said, you've gone through that journey. You've had the tantrums. You've seen what works, what doesn't work, and that's great. It's adapting. It's adapting and not forcing it to be something that it's not. So sounds idyllic. Your words.
I know, make it sound so easy. It's been painful at times. It has, and I think it's the painful. Unfortunately, as humans, we are more likely to change when we've experienced pain. When things are just a bit uncomfortable, we're like, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I can make do. It's all right. It's not until it's painful that we go, oh crap, I think I should do something now, which is ridiculous, because you can change things at any point of your life for some completely ridiculous reason. Well, we know what the reason is. It's because of, fight or flight. Oh my word, there's danger. We choose not to change until the poo hits the fan.
And that's always messy to clean up as well, because you have to try to get in between those blades is a nightmare. It's really interesting listening to everyone's kind of stories around this, because I can take I suppose my relationship around family back to about 2004. So 2004, when my daughter was born, we were both, I think we just moved back up to the Midlands. I was retraining as a podiatrist. In fact, my daughter was born 2 months after I started my training. My ex was an A&E nurse as well, and had shown up we'd moved back to the Midlands and gone to do an interview at a local hospital, but hadn't been lucky enough to get the job. And at that point was starting to show. And there's no way that you're going to walk into an NHS job and they're going to go, oh yeah, come and have the job. But by the way, have you been eating all the pies? It's not going to happen. So we were very lucky that we were able to make the decision that actually she could stay at home with the kids, and did that right the way through the schooling. And it was beautiful. We fell into very traditional roles. I went out, I earned the money, I trained to be a podiatrist, I ran my own business, I worked for the NHS. I did all those things and very much got on that trap of, this is what I do. And I remember particularly between 2012 and 2015, I was doing 7-day weeks because I was doing a master's degree and running my own business and working as a manager on the NHS. It was a horrendous time. And 2015 became that point where the bottom fell out of the world, everything kind of collapsed, and I got thrown out of the house. And that was a really good wake-up call for me, because it made me rethink what I wanted to do. And I ended up in my own podiatry business with the ability to be flexible with it. And I still remember kids were with long hours at school, but I could drop in after work and pick them up from school, and I would try and be there for as many things as possible. And sports days and all that kind of stuff, I was available for it. But it wasn't until 2018 when I sold my podiatry business, because I realized that actually I wanted to live in a very different way, that things shifted. And I still remember a conversation with my ex not long after we'd separated, and she said one thing to me which was really hard to hear, and it was, there's only one thing we wanted, and that was for you to be around more. And I said, I'm really grateful you've told me that. I said, and I should have known that. I said, but also one thing, that's the first time you've actually said that to me. And intuitively knowing it and actually doing it is different. But I sold my podiatry practice so I could move into coaching, so I could be around more, so I could be around for pickups, and I could be at home, and I could do a lot more with them. What's interesting is that then led to the end of the relationship, but that's a whole other story. But the freedom now, and now they're older, they don't want to spend as much time with me, and that's cool. But the freedom now is that if they say to me, oh, we're going to be doing this, can you come along? Because of the way I work now, there is that opportunity to do it. And actually, in many ways, the role is reversed. My ex works normal hours, whatever normal hours are. I have the flexibility and freedom to do stuff, so it's been a bit of a role reversal. But that journey of working out what's right and what's wrong, and that's all down to judgment, is really interesting. But there are certainly many years where I do regret the fact that I wasn't around as much as I could have been, particularly in that 2012 to 2015 period where I was working 7 days a week. I do question sometimes, and actually my daughter has got her first job, and we talk quite a lot now, and it's great. And I've talked to her about how I was over the years and how our relationship was, and she said something to me where I realized I hadn't got it too far wrong. I asked her, I said, how are you? I said, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? And she went, no, she said, I'm all good and I'm fine, thank you. And then she paused and she looked at me and she said, is there anything you need? And I was like, yeah, okay. Even though it's been a bit of a hard slog and there's probably been lots of excrement thrown at spinny things, we've probably done okay. And I think it lands how it lands. And what's really interesting as well is my dad worked very long hours as well, running his own business. And I think I probably ended up falling to that trap as well, because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought the right thing to do was go out and earn as much money as you possibly can and work really hard to support your family, which is great unless you see them. If you don't see them, it's no use at all. But it takes you time to learn those lessons.
And I think that's a really interesting point, because we do learn from the people who are around us. So I grew up in a seaside restaurant, because both my mum and dad, they had a seaside restaurant. So I would see them literally working all hours, because when you're a business owner, you think you need to work all hours.
Yeah.
You cannot afford to lose a client. So as a child, I'm watching them working, fortunately, Dave, to your point, because we lived above the restaurant. We were literally together 24/7. So my parents were always around. And then obviously, when I came of age, which was really young, we were then working in the restaurant. So, things like school holidays and weekends and so on were not the same as my friends, because we would be working and we'd look forward to the 2-week holiday at Christmas, because that's when nobody would be working and we could have some family time. So I think I'm going to say something else. Also, I remember my dad saying to me, you need to be the first one in and the last one to leave. And that really stayed with me. And it was really difficult to break that habit, because it was okay when I was working for someone else, because you think, well, they're paying your wages. You need to be physically there, because traditionally it's more about being present rather than output based. It's only in the last, I'm going to say maybe the last decade, where the way we work has changed and employers realize that actually it's about output and not people having their bums on a seat. Anyway, so I'm growing up with my parents working every hour. I've got this story running in my head of I must be the first one in and the last one to leave. And then I start my business. And it was a real difficult thing to break. And at the same time, doing a bit of reflection, I'm thinking, how was my childhood? It was a good childhood. There's always this underlying theme of we're all working. And what are we working for? We're working so we can enjoy life. Well, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So if I'm not enjoying life now, so I think that's one of the things that was sort of in my head, this push me, pull me type thing going, well, I want to work because I have to get my business off the ground. I want to have a successful business so it can generate money so that we can do nice things. And at the same time, like you said, Dave, your children are only young for a certain amount of time and they want to spend time with you. And then they grow up and go, well, now I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's not necessarily going to involve mum and dad. I'm going to want to do my own things. I'm not going to want to spend as much time with them. And I want to be present in their life now, because they might not want me later.
And that is so true. It's really interesting to listen to you speak about that. My dad ran some very successful insurance brokers. And I remember being 10 years old when he started his first business. He just left his corporate role and he'd gone into his first business. And he was very successful with that. And it's really interesting. If I look at the way I've worked, I'm chasing a success which he probably had, thinking that's the right way to do it. And it's interesting with comparisonitis, and I'm sure it happens with parents all the time. So that was really interesting. But I still remember a conversation with my dad when my daughter was literally a few days old. I wanted to be this super dad who could do a degree and could come home and breastfeed till 3 a.m. and could do all this kind of stuff. And my man said to me, he said, do what you're good at. He said, you do what you're good at. The wife does what she's good at and gets on with it. And while that was a beautiful thing to say, I think it kind of I dropped a few things and I kind of went down that route of I'm just going to go and do these things instead. And I know I made some very poor decisions where, and I think you do this with family, where family are forgiving. So if you've got the choice between I've got to go and see a client or I've got to do some work versus I'm going to have a little bit of disappointment of my children, which one do you take? Which one do you feel is more important in the context of a capitalist society and it's earning money? And that's that kind of external pressure. And now I wish I'd had the gumption to turn around and go, no, up yours. I'm just going to do something different instead. But it's interesting reflecting on it. It all seems so easy. But in the time you go along with what feels right, and having a huge amount of compassion for that older version of me or that younger version of me and going, you did all right, mate. Really. But it's hard.
It is hard. And you can only ever make the decision you make is the best decision at the time you made it. It's that simple. And it's like you said, we could beat ourselves up and go, oh, that was rubbish. Why did I do that? At the time, that was the best decision for you. End of story. It is what it is. And I can remember having several conversations because I'm really bad. No, I could improve on the healthy barriers that I build around myself and my family. And I think all business owners will experience at some point a level of burnout, whatever that looks like to them. And it's those boundaries that we have around ourselves, around our family, around our business, to try and reduce the likelihood that we are going to experience burnout. And I can remember after I'd started my first business and I had been working at it for about a year and it wasn't going how I wanted it to go, and I was beating myself up, and it was Christmas time and I was basically just like doing the pity dance myself, throwing my own Maria pity party. And I was in the conservatory and my husband was sort of giving me space because he could see that, don't come near, let me sort it out for myself. And I remember looking at my children through the patio doors, getting really excited about Christmas. And I was like, Maria, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're just like in the wrong energy, feeling sorry for yourself. And you've been feeling sorry for yourself for a long time. I think we've felt the feelings. Now it's time to do something about it, because they are not going to be young forever. And you are missing out. And this is a time where FOMO, the fear of missing out, is very much relevant. So decide what you're going to do and enjoy your family. And I think it's those moments that just like, poke you when you go, crap, I need some boundaries around me to like stop this from happening, because there's lots of good stuff going on, and we can focus far too easily on all the crap that's going on.
And I think this is one of the challenges that, at least from my experience, people who don't have families and kids struggle with as well. It's the prioritizing life, because if you have a family, you at least have this motivation to figure out your work-life balance for the kids. You have this clarity of, well, I want to spend time with them. Yes, I want to earn the money, but I want to earn the money in a way so I can do what's good for my kids. And yes, having money for them is great, but having the time for them is great as well. I think that's been my journey, is to figure out that I don't want to have family. So what is it that I want, other than just working all hours all the time to make more money? For what? Like, yes, money is nice and I can spoil my cat, and he demands my attention as well here and there, but he's not so demanding. So it's, I think, a different type of challenge, but a similar circumstance for people who don't have families, who don't have kids, is realizing, well, what is it that for me is important? What is it that motivates me outside of work and business, making money, that I want to prioritize, and I want to figure out my balance, so then I don't work Monday till Sunday morning till evening, and I actually design the business around my lifestyle. Because I can, because then it's the beauty of not having a kids, not having family. I can do whatever, however I want, but it's still not something, I think we're hopefully finally getting there. But when I started my business 8 years ago, it wasn't really vocal out there to be like, you can design the business your way. You don't have to do it the way everyone has always done it. You can find a way of not working Monday till Sunday, all hours, 24/7 to be on and have your business to be your lifestyle and be everything and be so invested in it that nothing else matters.
So it's interesting as well, because I think the way that society is, that if you take parents with children, they are always in many ways prioritized in terms of things like annual leave and time off because of the kids. And that's brilliant when you're a parent, but when you're not, it's a real pain. There's a real inequity in that, and I understand why it can be like that. But I think it's something to really look at in the same way as we all have stress. We all have trauma. Some people, in a comparative way, will have something which looks massively huge compared to something which looks small for someone else. But both groups could still be experiencing exactly the same amount of traumatic symptoms. We have that whole kind of comparative suffering stuff. But it's really interesting when I think back to my work. I'm very good at throwing myself into my work as a distraction. And one of my struggles with, probably from about 14 years old, when I had a friend at school who was abducted and murdered, was emotional regulation, particularly around anger. And I would find that I would end up getting really triggered by being around the kids, and I would feel some real anxiety around them. And that was hard to deal with. So for me, hiding in my work was brilliant, because I could my work was there. I didn't have to deal with emotions around work. I just got stuck into it. Kids were much, much harder. And I still remember thinking that when my daughter was 3 months old, that she was mocking me by not going to sleep. And I'm like, I think back on it now and think, God, Dave, what a twat. You're putting this kind of this power of intelligence on a child at 3 months old, and actually it's got nothing to do with her. She's just pooing and peeing and throwing up on you and having colic and not going to sleep, because that's what babies do. But it's really interesting looking back over that for me, there was a massive amount of safety within work, and I would probably have taken any opportunity to do more work. So it's very interesting to reflect on that as well. And I was probably given an easy way out to do that too. But it's fascinating.
Your daughter might have also picked up on your energy, because
God.
she might not be rationally intelligent in a way that, adults are, but the same way I see it with animals, you see it with kids. Obviously, she's perceptive what's happening out there. She feels the energy that you put in there. So the more anxious and annoyed and stressed you are, the more likely it is that the baby's not going to sleep, and the baby's going to be sick, and the baby's going to have tantrums.
Oh yeah, and the biggest baby in the room was me. But it is really interesting, and I have conversations with my daughter actually around this quite often, and it's great to get her input on it, because she remembers certain things about growing up, about what my behavior was like and how that had an effect on her, and her joke, and she's got my sense of humor, which I'm not sure is a good thing or not. Her joke is, well, I hope you're saving for my therapy fund. So she kind of gets that actually the trauma which will have happened from having me as a dad, and probably having had her mom as a mom as well, will lean right the way through into her adult life. And in many ways, it feels a little bit healthier to acknowledge that, because I'm still dealing with stuff at 51, which was going on when I was a teenager. But it's really interesting having the conversations with her now. And she's massively emotionally intelligent. She's far more emotionally intelligent than I am now, and certainly than I was then.
So one question that, just going on from what Maria said, is COVID was the sort of the catalyst that got her changing the way that she runs a business. But Dave, you come back, you're further back, and so this might be more relevant for you. Is there also a difference in attitude about, it's now more acceptable to maybe say, actually, I want to focus on my kids, or actually I'm not going to see you today because I'm doing something with my kids, but we can see tomorrow morning. Is that more acceptable now? Whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was like you put business first, family is just there because, you've got a family, that's your problem, but it's not, don't make it my problem type of attitude. Do you think that there's a change in this perception that you actually are parents, and whether you are employed or self-employed, it's okay to be a parent? Whereas a good few years ago, it was almost like, shush, we don't need to know that you're a parent because you actually doing business, and that's all we see. Does that sort of question or rambling make some sort of sense? It'd be interesting to see from both of you your perspectives on that. I mean, I get the feeling that it has shifted a bit, but I'm not in that environment. So am I seeing that it is shifting, or is that just my imagination and what?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. And my gut would say that yes, it is shifting. But what I really think with that is I think that the pressure to continue to work and maybe put work above family now comes from a different place. So if you were working for someone before, we've all heard the horror stories about your manager contacts you at 10 o'clock at night and say, I need this report on my desk tomorrow, and you've done nothing on it, and you've got to stay up all night and deliver it. And the pressures of, if you don't do this, you're likely to lose your job. So it's a very big external pressure on you. You have to come to work. I think the pressure's shifted now. And if you look at the whole kind of hustle culture, it's if you haven't got what you think you have, then you should have, then you're probably not working hard enough. So I think it becomes then an internal thing, particularly as and I'm going to use this word, and I hate this word, entrepreneurs. That always makes me want to throw up in my mouth. It just means someone makes money in a business. But if you are working for yourself, that the pressure comes from a different place. And working for yourself, that there can be a feast and famine cycle. So you might have a period where it's quiet and you're like, what do I do with this? So I think that the focus or where the pressure comes from is different. I think the other side of that is that there's a lot of things which have changed in terms of I suppose, of law around how you treat parents. And, we're still a bit behind in the UK about shared paternity leave for a start, which I find is interesting. And really, it should be shared parental leave, I think, is probably a better phrase for it, because it's not just paternity leave or maternity leave, but it's being able to work out what the best setup is, so that for those early few months of your child's life, you can set things up. And a lot more things are being put into law. And probably the other thing I'd add to that as well, it's something you said, Maria, earlier about burnout. I honestly think, and I got questioned on this when I was speaking at an event last year where I said, I've got to talk about burnout. And I said, I don't think you can avoid it. I said, if you're an entrepreneur, so I'm using that word again, I have to wash my mouth afterwards. But if you are an entrepreneur, you are probably going to burn out at some point, because it's the stupid kind of shit that we do as small business owners. And the key is not to necessarily to avoid it, which would be beautiful. The key is to bounce back from it as quickly as possible, or to bounce forward from it. So yeah, there's three things in there for me. I think it's where does the pressure come from? Is it external? Where does the pressure come from? Is it internal? And what's society telling you? And what's the hustle culture? And what's the kind of stupid stuff we do as small business owners anyway?
So I'm going to answer it from a slightly different perspective. I remember when I was on maternity leave with my daughter, so we're going back 11 years, so still within like the time frame you were talking about, Natalie. I was on a maternity course. I can't remember what the name of it was, but the company paid for an external person to come in and give you guidance on how you navigate coming back into work, and the type of things that you want to think about, like working hours, and how are you going to manage the emotional side of, you're a mum and now you've got to work and all that fluffy stuff. And one of the topics of conversation was around, if you're going to come back, well, regardless of whether you come back part-time or full-time, you might need to leave because you need to go and pick up your children from nursery. How would you have that conversation? And I'm quite an honest person, and I'd be like, well, I need to leave now because I've got to go and pick up my child from nursery. And the lady said to me, why do you need to tell somebody that you need to leave for a reason? your working hours are from X to X. That time comes, you can just leave. You don't see your boss going to you, I need to leave now, because they just leave. And I found that really uncomfortable because I wasn't used to just leaving at the time. And that got me thinking. And I was thinking, well, hang on a second, that's right. You know, like a man wouldn't give a reason for having to leave slightly earlier than everybody else. You just leave. And I am generalizing. I just so happen to work for a very heavily male-dominated company. So I was a minority as a female. And so I think, going back to Dave's point, it is that internal system of yours, you know, do you think it's acceptable the way that you're behaving? Is that okay? Does that sit okay? Or is it uncomfortable? And do you start hearing yourself come up with all the, well, I should do this and I should do that and I should do the other? So I think a lot of it does, first of all, start internally. And then it's the acknowledgement of any external pressure. And I think from a how the world generally has changed, I always remember that news program where they were doing the Zoom interview, and the man's there having a very serious interview on the news. The door opens, a child comes in one of those like baby seat thingy, and then you see the wife, you know, like sneaking in trying to grab the children. And I think, and I'm sure that was pre-COVID. And then during COVID, you know, it was normal to see people's dogs, cats, children on a Zoom screen. That was absolutely normal. And I used to run a networking group on a Friday morning, and it started at 8:30. And obviously my children are leaving. Was it 8:30? It was 8 o'clock. I've actually been feeling it was 8 o'clock. And my children would always come in to say goodbye to me because they were about to go to school. Yeah. And so it was quite normal to have, you know, yes, I am a business owner. And yes, by the way, I'm a mum as well. Here are my children. It's normal. And people now seem to be more accepting because we've had to live through it, and we've been forced, and I think in a positive way, to say, no, I'm more than my job. There is more to me than you seeing me work. So I think there has been progress. I think since 2020, it's progressed at a quicker rate because we've been forced to, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting to that as we I mean, I still think we're still moving back into an in-person world. I would love to see that kind of access to people actually mimic itself in the real world as well. And it's interesting. I took my daughter to a Chamber of Commerce event last year before she got her job, and it was beautiful to be able to take a part of my kind of life with me into a business space. And that was lovely. In fact, she got more attention than I did. She was the fact of that they spelt the name of my business wrong, and it wasn't Dave the Coach, it was Dave the Couch, which I thought was hilarious anyway. But she loved it. She was in her element, and it was really nice to kind of go, actually, you know, I am more than the business. And luckily, a lot of the networking groups I go to, there's still very much those transactional spaces, which are, so give me your 60-second pitch about what you do so I can decide if I want to listen to you or not, to actual networking events where it's like, okay, tell me about you first. You know, what is it about you that I need to know when you're creating a real relationship? But yes, that access to the inside of people's homes, that access to, you know, the background with all kinds of stuff in, relaxed things a whole lot more. And I'd love to see more of that. But for me anyway, there just seems to be that little bit of sneaking back to the pre kind of lockdown life, and I wonder how far that will creep back before people go, no, up yours, we're not playing that game. And I hope it's sooner rather than later.
I've got two examples. So my husband, the company he works for, they've fully embraced the fact that the world has changed and they've gone along with it. My old company, having spoken to a friend who still works there, they very much are, you need to be in the office this percentage of the time. And it's like, well, how is that? How have you come up with that number? How is that actually benefiting the employees and therefore the company? So I think you're right. I think maybe more of the traditional companies, the companies that have been around a long time and the culture is really set in its ways, I think are trying to claw back to the old ways. I think new companies are more likely to go, oh, hey, this seems to work for our employees, which actually means it probably works best for our organization, because happy employees means,
Well, yeah,
they're going to be more productive, and why wouldn't you? So I think there's a split in that sense.
yeah, and it's interesting with that. And I had a great conversation with somebody I know locally who teaches mindfulness for businesses and goes into the industrial engineering sectors and teaches it. And we have very similar conversations about it. If you come at it from a human first place, then you have happier employees. And if you have happier employees, you may not make more money in some respects. It's very hard to actually put an economic figure on that, but you'll have less turnover of staff, and we know that saves you a lot of money. And happy employees, they rave about it. There's so many benefits to it, and you take that people first approach, but there is that kind of old guard of businesses which are trying to go back to the traditional ways, because that was, that we always do business in a traditional way and then we vote Conservative. It's that kind of route. But there's a lot more information now about better ways to do it. And that's really exciting.
And it comes down a lot to the leadership. And, we definitely from the research and from the news can see that if the ownership, if the managerial level, if the leaders are more of the times and more aware, and they have their own ego in check, that usually they are more likely to allow the flexible working. Because even companies, there's interesting research, companies who have unlimited amount of vacation, it's still that those people actually take the least amount of vacation. It's so interesting to look how really human behavior happens in there. But usually the case is for companies who encourage people in a not so helpful way to fully come back. It's often because of the leadership, because they only see themselves valuable and meaningful if they are seen in the hallways, rather than appreciating the outcome and the well-being and stuff like that. I really hope that, we will be in a world where we will just have the flexibility to appreciate when and where, how we work the best, so we do the best job. Because if we do the best job, the companies benefit the most from us, and it shouldn't matter when and where and how we do it. But it might be just naive to really hope that this is the world we are leading into.
And it's interesting, actually. It's that difference between the how you are perceived visibly in a role versus how you actually are, and there's a lot placed upon ego and appearance rather than other things. And it's interesting, actually, something I just remember, Maria, just touching on something you said before. Female in a male-dominated environment. I spent most of my healthcare career as a male in a female-dominated environment. So, it's really interesting when there's always a lot of conversations that I hear anyway around, the conversations about women in the C-suite and about equalizing things and having, but no one ever warned me when I went into healthcare that I'd be working with, what it was like to work with large groups of women. And I have to say, I feel much more comfortable if I go to an event and it's all women, because that's what I'm used to. And conversations around children and childcare and time off and leaving early, they were normal business practices with the groups of people I was working with. So for me, it doesn't feel alien at all. And I know I talked to some of my male mates, and it's kind of like they just find it a bit weird because it's not something that they've experienced. And it was just when you're talking about that before, I was like, oh yeah, I've totally kind of flipped experience in many ways. It's, again, fascinating stuff.
Well, do you know what? There was the first time, because I was a bit naive, to be honest with you, when I started in my place of work. I had no idea that I was working for an engineering company. So there should have been a clue that it was going to be male dominated. I didn't pick up on it. And I was in the canteen on the first day getting my lunch. And it was very, it was a typical canteen, it was massive, and it was a like conveyor belt. You go and you get your stuff. I'd got my meal, I'd paid for it, and then you'd go and get your cutlery. And I remember looking up and going, there's a lot of men in this room, isn't there? And then going and sitting down and having my lunch. Yeah. And for 17 years, I mean, my background, I'm Greek Cypriot anyway, so men dominate our culture, so that wasn't unusual. And then I go and work for an engineering company where men dominated the workplace. So I personally was quite comfortable in that environment because I'd grown up with strong male characters, which made me a strong female character. So I was fine. Many of my colleagues, my female colleagues, were uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And that's only because, like what you said, Dave, I was used to it. This was normal. Whereas they weren't used to it and it wasn't their normal. So, it is. It's how it's your experiences that make you the person you are, and therefore allow you to either face up to stuff or go, not sure about this. I might just go a different direction. And that's what I want to teach my children, that it's like, you are your own person. I want you to be, this is going to sound really weird, I want you to be uncomfortable so that you can learn from being uncomfortable. Although as a parent, I want to save them all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter comes home and she'll say to me, Mummy, blah, 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 and I'm like, in my inside, I'm going, right, I'm going to go and find that child, or I need to go and talk to that parent. And then I go, and breathe. No, because there will always be a Billy, a Joe, a Susan, whether during childhood or adulthood. And it is not my business to try and remove these challenges. It's my business to equip my children with the tools and the techniques without coaching them, because I do have a tendency to try and coach, and I am a parent to my children, not a coach, so that they can navigate life, because life can be hard and horrible.
When they turn around to you and my eldest lad regurgitates coaching stuff back to me, and I'm like, bugger, I just went a bit coaching you there, didn't I? But he's not saying anything which is wrong. It's really interesting, that whole kind of safety thing. I totally get it. And I remember having a conversation with my daughter at 15, because she wanted more freedom. I wanted her locked in her bedroom with padlocked underwear and no access to a window. And we had this really good conversation, which, as I said, look, you want total freedom. I said, I want you to be totally safe. I said, and we have to find a place to play on this line, and it's going to be uncomfortable for both of us. Me knowing it's going to be more uncomfortable for me, because I've got to kind of sit back and let her go on and make her mistakes. I can't protect her for that point. And she ended up away for a little while. And I went to visit her when she was 17. And I turned up, and the first thing, I went and visited her. I messaged her, and we met up. We were going out for a coffee to catch up while I was there with her. And I said to her, for a moment, I thought I was coming to look after you and save you. I said, now I realize I'm just here to spend some time with you. And it was a real kind of wake up call for me to go, I can only protect her to a point, but I will never stop worrying about her. I'll never stop worrying about her brothers. In fact, from the moment, and I said the very same conversation with someone this morning, from the moment that one sperm hit that one egg back in 2004, I will worry until the day I die. But there's only one thing I really ultimately would like my kids to have, and that's to be happy. And if I've learned anything from my experiences of being a son and being a brother and being a parent, is that probably is the ultimate thing. It's have enough and be happy. And I hope that comes through in my parenting, even with my throwing myself into work, having burnout, and being a bit of an arse at times. But that for me is the ultimate thing, is be happy.
A question for both of you is, you've come from the corporate, like Maria's come from the corporate, you have your own business, you've had your own business for a while. Is what lessons have you learned? What sort of advice can you share to those business owners who are either in employment and wanting to become a business owner, or are business owners? Is what advice or just tips can you share about juggling family and finding that idyllic situation that suits them? So some nuggets that you've picked up over the years that you can pass on to those coming up behind you.
Buy a cat.
Okay.
Buy a cat.
That's what Lenka's done. So she's sorted.
There we go. Lenka saw it. Lenka. Do you know it's really interesting, and I would, while I was listening to you talk about that, I would bring it down to one word, and it's communication. And the reason I bring it down to that word is because I know that probably throughout my relationship, the communication wasn't good enough, and I hold my hands up on that one, because there's quite a lot. I know communication is multiple sides to it, but there were times where I would make a decision to do something, but I wouldn't explain it because I thought that my ex could read my mind, and I'm sure it went the other way as well. Communication is huge, and it's knowing you want to start a business and you've got a family. I mean, I started, I mean, it's been 14 years now since I've run my own business, and nine years since it's been my exclusive thing, which is why I have no hair. But I still remember that it was November the 6th, 2010, when me and my ex-business partner in podiatry, we saw our first patients in a clinic in Kidderminster in Worcestershire. My youngest son at that point was not quite 5 months old. Because why would you want to spend time at home with your youngest, the third child, because you're having three because you want to see if you can get it right for the third time because you messed the first two up. And here I am starting a business which was then going to lead me for the next 8 years, doing, pretty much doing 7-day weeks and working late nights. And even my youngest now, he'll turn around to me and say, I still remember when you used to come home on a Wednesday night and we'd be in bed. And it was heartbreaking to hear that. So to kind of track back, communication, understand why you're doing it, and also understand that it's not going to be easy. And aside from all the business stuff about the statistics, about how many businesses fail in that certain period, how cash flow is and all of those kind of things, you've got to understand how hard it's going to be, and you've got to get, and another term I hate, you've got to get buy-in. It's very corporate, and I'm just going to have to wash my mouth out after this. But you have to make sure everyone's on the same page with it, and keep talking about it, and be realistic.
So I'm not going to be as succinct as Dave. I was reading a post on LinkedIn earlier today, and the word that jumped out was freedom.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I think a lot of us, whether we have a family or don't, the reason why we go into business is because we want freedom. We want the freedom to do what we want, when we want, with who we want. And that's the thing that we need to hold on to when we're in business, I think. It is, you have freedom. You can make the decisions that are right for you. Big Brother isn't going to come and tell you off and tell you what to do and when to do it. So if you have the advantage, the luxury of having freedom, then make the decisions that are right for you, which means that you can continue to have freedom. Because I think when you become a business owner, if you're not careful, you actually lock yourself in jail. So, freedom. I'm just going to leave it at that, really.
It's really interesting. Freedom is one of my values, and I have so much more freedom now. I've never been I'm going to go lie on the beach for 2 weeks kind of person with a good book. It doesn't work for me. But having some variety in my week does. So tomorrow I'm going to go and watch a show at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford for a 1:30 matinee, and the clients can wait. But I still remember in my first business, and one of the reasons I sold my first business is because I had created this beautiful prison. And what made it even worse is I built the bloody thing. And it was just like this. It was just like, for shame. I built something because I built something by mistake. I had no plan to ever work for myself, but I think the writing was on the wall. And then I realized that I was not happy with it. And so I sold it. I probably would have walked away from it 6 months after selling it had I not sold it. and I was very lucky to sell it. But it is very easy to, and even now, there's moments where I create something and I go, I've just created something which traps me, but what can I do to reverse that a little bit? So I'm totally with you. Freedom is huge, 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 huge.
And I think it's a wonderful way to wrap it all up, to get on the same page, because no matter if you want freedom for yourself, if you want freedom for yourself and your partner, if you want freedom for yourself to spend your time with your kids or with your cat or with your dog, it doesn't matter. But I think as Maria said, the number one reason why so many people do go with self-employment, starting businesses, going freelance, or looking for companies who do offer very flexible jobs is the control over our time, is the freedom to do whenever we want, however we want, and to be able to really design our lives. But this comes through intentional choices, not going into having a business just because it's a cool thing to do. I can make more money. It's how I, can really do more of coaching because I really want to coach people, but I don't want to do the marketing and business and taxes and admin and everything. This idea of having a business, it's easy and it's sexy. It's not. Like, it takes a lot of time and effort, but also it can be, if we really come into it with a mindset like, how would this work if it was easy? How can I design, that's my experience, the most minimal viable business that gives me the amount of money that I need to have the life that I really want to have? And so I can buy my cat all the treats that he wants. I started working hard just so I can spoil my cat. Like, honestly, if it would be just for me, I would be a very easy person. But because of my cat, I need to work much harder.
That's probably the most honest reason for working hard I've ever come across. Because family is not one of my values. So if I had a cat, I'd probably do the same.
I think that this has been such an interesting conversation. I loved how it evolved. Like, yes, we talked a lot about being a parent, but we talked also about just, the life and the journey and the lessons and everything, which is wonderful that our little experiment with you guys as our guinea pigs has worked, because I think this is a fantastic episode, a fantastic conversation. And we could talk forever and ever, and I think you guys get along really well. We had a good balance. You were not shouting at each other. There was no, inappropriate behavior. So I'm very glad for that. But I wanted to give you each a last chance to share a final nugget, be it about your experience as a parent and a business owner, or as a human being, seeking to have more life in your life in general. And I will start in the reverse order, and I will start with Dave.
Really good question. I know when I look back over my parenting career so far, it's a terrible CV that I carry a huge amount of dad guilt about not being present, about not being the best dad I could be, and it's so many things, and also a lot of comparison. So I talk to friends of mine, and I see these people with beautiful parenting lives online and all this kind of stuff, and it took me a long while to realize that actually there's no right or wrong way to do it. You do the best you can at the time. And while I can, I'm aware now of where I haven't done things as well as I could have done in the past. I try and make better decisions now. And like things like school holidays, I got a National Trust membership very specifically so I could take my kids out for National Trust and drink hot chocolate and walk around, and they could tell me dick jokes because they're that kind of age anymore. And that for me is fun. But it's understanding that actually there's no one way to do all of this stuff. And the more that I hear and have conversation like with Maria, and it's been beautiful to kind of hear somebody else's perspective and to be able to, I'm going to say another coachy word now, and I'm going to like coaching hell at this point, to hold space for all these alternative things. I'm sorry, I hate that phrase. To hold space for other people's experiences and go, you know what? It's all really cool at the end of the day. So I love that. So thank you.
And I think for me, it's okay to say sorry. So there are going to be times, and there are times when I need to say sorry, and I have no problem, like in the main, depends who it is, saying sorry. And I will make an effort to say to my children when I've made a mistake, because I am only human. I do make mistakes, and therefore I say sorry. I usually say sorry to my daughter, to be honest with you. I say sorry to both of them, though. So yeah, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I made a mistake.
Beautiful final words. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you so much for taking the time to share so openly about, the challenges and ups and downs and the mistakes along the way. And if anyone listening wants to connect with you for whatever reason, to, hear some jokes, to get some support, to learn more, whatever it is, where will they find you? Maria, where they can go to find out more about you?
So I can't tell a joke other than I have got one. Sorry, I have got one. My children hate me saying this. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Because it was stapled to the punk.
To see its flatmate. Anyway, watch the tumbleweeds. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just type in Maria Newman. And I also am on TikTok. That's Maria Newman Coaching. That's me.
So cool. So I'm actually going to tell a joke as well, actually. It's a terrible joke. Because when you write comedian on things, people expect you to be their performing comedic monkey, and I'm not doing that. But when my kids were all still at school, when my daughter was there as well, you go and do the obligatory first school morning photo, and I wouldn't put it on Facebook because that's just what everyone does. And that you'd be like, smile, and be like, "Rrr." So I'd tell them a joke. And the last photo I've got of all three of them together in their school uniforms, and my daughter was finishing sixth form for entering that last year, was told them a joke about a man and a woman go to a dinner party. And they sit down opposite another couple and have the most amazing meal. And, towards the end of the night, they're feeling a bit full. And the guy undoes his jacket a little bit, and he just leans over and he lets out this very audible fart. Of course, it's at the point where the music goes a bit silent and everyone hears it. And the man opposite in the couple leans forward. He goes, "Sir," he said, "how dare you fart in front of my wife?" To which the man turns around and goes, "I'm really sorry. I didn't realize it was her turn." The photo I got from that joke is one of my favorite ever photos, because I have three different looks. I have my youngest just looks like what's gone on. My daughter's laughing incredibly. Then my very tall eldest lad he's just kind of looking up at the sky. It's like three very different results. It's brilliant. But anyway, back to the question of where you can find me. So I've got a website which needs some work on it, which is davethecoach.co.uk. Most of the places I play now are LinkedIn. If you come and type Dave James, you'll find a remotely professional looking picture of me in a green shirt, and I post video every day at the moment and probably talk quite a lot of crap. But yeah, come and connect with me on there. If you want to have a chat, let me know.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for being here again, for sharing openly, for having this fun conversation with us and sharing with our listeners. And to our listeners, we would love to hear your perspective. If you have anything to add, be it from a perspective of a parent, from a perspective of an upcoming future parent, from someone who has a business or that is worried about starting a business as a parent, we would love to hear your experiences. And if you have any questions, obviously let us know as well. And until next time, see you soon, guys. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.